My name is Claire Ladd. I'm the Programs and Services Manager at the Massachusetts Nonprofit Network. Thanks for joining us today. Just before we dig in, I want to let you know the recording and the slides from today's program will be emailed to you following the webinar. And please keep an eye out for that. If you have technical difficulties at any time, just let us know via the chat. And if you have questions at any time, you can submit those via the Q&A function. I also want to give a little bit of background about us here at MNN. Our three goals are to strengthen the nonprofit sector through advocacy, public awareness, and capacity building. So this webinar is part of our capacity building offerings, and please stay tuned for future webinars in the coming months. Let us know if you have any topics you'd like to see. Our efforts are made possible by our more than 600 member organizations, so thanks to all who are members. If you have not yet joined, I encourage you to look into the benefits on our website. And as for today's webinar, so that it will be leveraging your employee benefits as a nonprofit and presented by Ryan Ransford and Chris O'Shea from Sentinel Group. Sentinel Group, one of the largest employee benefits firms in the Northeast, was founded in 1987 as Sentinel Benefits and Financial Group. It began as a family business, has grown to serve more than 3,000 businesses throughout the United States and employs more than 260 associates. Ryan is a dedicated retirement plan advisor and has been with Sentinel for 12 years. His expertise lies in working closely with plan sponsors to create, execute, and oversee retirement plan benefits tailored specifically to meet the needs of their employees. Chris is an employee benefits consultant at Sentinel. Chris consults and advises current and prospective clients on complex benefit programs, plan designs, and compliance issues. Using his extensive human resource and insurance background, he is able to provide expert advice, develop solutions for current and future project plans, and execute strategies to consistently illustrate value for his clients. And with that, I will hand it over to the presenters to get started.
Thanks, Claire. So here, Ryan, if you just want to kick over to the agenda, we'll get things started here. So thank you, everyone, for joining this afternoon. As Claire made reference to, my name is Chris O'Shea. I'm employee benefits consultant here at Sentinel Group. We're located up here in Wakefield, Mass. Presenting today alongside my colleague, Ryan Mansford, who will introduce himself as well momentarily. We're excited to be here today. We are newer affiliate members to the Mass Nonprofit Network, just joining this past January. We had a couple of other connections within our network who spoke very highly of the association, and we were looking for more ways to get involved kind of in the nonprofit ecosystem here in Massachusetts. So we thought this would be a great way to do it. So just for the purpose of today and what we're going to cover, we'll share with you a little bit more about Sentinel Group, who we are, right? Being new members, we want to a little exposure and to give you guys a sense of who we are and where we might fit in within your organization. Then we're going to touch upon, and it's really going to be, the crux of the presentation, a lot of employee benefits that not only our nonprofit clients are offering, but a lot of the prospective folks we talk to in the nonprofit space are offering to their organizations, specific to group insurance, which is more my expertise. And then Ryan's going to kind of delve into more the retirement side, which is more his expertise. And then towards the end, as you guys might be fading a little bit, we'll get into the boring legal and compliance stuff, right? I'm going to touch upon Medicaid redeterminations very quickly, which is very prevalent here or something that's newer here in Massachusetts since the start of April. That may be impactful to the organization. So I'm going to touch upon that. And then Ryan's going to dive into some Secure 2.0 stuff on the retirement side for you all. So before I kind of get into the Sentinel overview, Ryan, just want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So as Claire mentioned, my name is Ryan Ransford. I've been at Sentinel for 12 years and work closely with Chris and our other teams here at Sentinel. And our primary role is working with plan sponsors, both for nonprofits and for-profit organizations. And it's always extremely interesting to us as we work across many different industries, many different kinds of nonprofits that we work with. And I think part of what we want to share today is just a little bit of our experience, what we see in the marketplace. We'll tie in a little bit of what we're hearing from clients and what's top of mind in this space as well. feel free to throw some questions in the chat. So I'll continue with just a little bit about who Sentinel is and what we do, just as a background for the rest of the presentation. But first and foremost, as Chris mentioned and Claire mentioned, we do employee benefits on the health and retirement side. We always want to put our clients first, and we really hold ourselves out to be benefit experts. We follow a fiduciary standard of care, and we try to make it our business to know our clients, the companies, organizations, as we have found that goals may be similar, but it's different for each organization, and employee demographics are different for each organization. So it's our responsibility to try and tailor the best benefits package for you. So again, we'll try and pull some of that information into today's presentation. Here's just some stats. I think Claire mentioned we've been around for over 35 years. We have an average client tenure of 10 plus years on both the health insurance and retirement side. Like I mentioned before, this is an area that we focused in from day one. So on the retirement side, I know we have over 2,000 administration clients, and similar on the health insurance side as well. This is a good slide here. Just gives you a quick overview of all the different types of employee benefits we do for organizations. It includes the group insurance on the bottom, so that's health insurance consultant. It includes the health and welfare services, which is that reimbursement account, so HSAs, FSAs, COBRA administration, etc. And then the two blue boxes are more on the retirement side with the record keeping administration of 403b plans, 401k plans, which we'll get into a little bit, as well as the fiduciary advisory side, which is taking that fiduciary role as an advisor to the retirement plan. And this goes into some of what we do that we work with, obviously a lot of nonprofit organizations as a provider, but also we do a lot of volunteer days at Sentinel. It's a big thing that we've been doing since we've started, or I've been here for over 12 years, and it's a big part of what we do, and we're pretty proud of it. And we tried to do as much as we could through COVID, and I'm happy to say that we've done a couple of days just in the last few months this summer. So it's always an exciting thing for our group to get out there and be in the community and work alongside some nonprofit organizations in the area. So enough about Sentinel. I'll kick it back over to Chris. We'll talk about a little bit about the health insurance. We'll go into the retirement, and then, as Chris mentioned, we'll walk into some of the legislation toward the end, and we'll try and keep this as exciting as possible.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so more so, as I made reference to earlier, group insurance is the group that I'm here at Sentinel. So I'm going to speak a little bit more about health insurance, some of the ancillary lines, EAP, and things like that. So some of it may be basic for a lot of you folks, right? But also we're going to dive into wellness and things like that, and some other things that have been trendy in the marketplace recently with a lot of the folks that we've been speaking with. So when we're dealing with a nonprofit, right, I think kind of the baseline is health insurance, right? So a lot of the nonprofit organizations that we're working with, or if they're not offering health insurance, they're trying to, right? Obviously, as many of you know, it's just a good way to help folks manage healthcare costs. A lot of the ways in which you can structure a health insurance plan, which make it affordable for both employers and employees, is to do an employer contribution, right? So you as the employer determine that you may want to roll out one or two plans to start, right? And when you do that, you determine how much your budget allows for you to contribute to those premiums for employees, right? That drives up enrollments, drives up participation, makes you, a more attractive organization to work for, right? Because as we all know, health insurance is incredibly expensive. The cost is not going down, right? So we often say to a lot of our client companies that it's very rare that folks invest in something so heavily that they know so little about, right? So they're willing to go spend on technology and things like that for their house, but something that may hit closer to home is if someone gets sick or they need to utilize the health insurance. So to have that employer-sponsored health plan in place is the most common way to do it. and the most common way that a lot of employees across the country, and especially here in Mass, gain access to that coverage, right? And allows them to get that care. So a lot of times people ask from a benchmarking standpoint, contributions, where should they be at as an employer, right? That runs the gamut. We have clients who may want to start by contributing, 50 or 60% to the employee only tier of a plan, right? Pay a little bit more if they want to add a dependent or other family member on there. So it's really dependent upon your budget. It could run upwards of 75% of a contribution for the employee only and a little bit less for a family, but it really depends on where you're at as an organization, and what you can afford to do, right? So we were cognizant of that and like to make recommendations based upon that in our analysis. So in addition to health insurance, there are a lot of different ancillary benefits that a lot of organizations bolt on to a program after they get that main health insurance program in place. So some of those benefits include dental, vision, life, disability, right? So both long and short-term disability are very common offerings. Dental and vision are probably the ones we see the most in addition to health insurance, and then usually life and disability follow suit. So in addition, another ancillary benefit that we've certainly seen an uptick in since COVID began, right, the public health emergency, are EAP, or employee assistance programs, right? So a lot of times these are inclusive in some of your ancillary offerings, right? So within your disability benefits, you might have an employee assistance program benefit that's built in there, it's baked in, right? So you guys are actually paying for it as an employer, but utilization has always been historically low on these programs. And that's for a number of reasons. I mean, one of the biggest ones is just awareness. There's typically, historically, not a lot of awareness around these programs, but I think, like I just made reference to, during COVID, there was an uptick in this because things like mental health issues, stress management, financial planning, that's a common everyday issue, but you can get confidential counseling, right? You can get legal assistance, things like that. We've also, as a result, the employee assistance programs that are within these ancillary benefits are often very basic, right? You might get 1 or 2 visits a year with one of these counselors. Some folks have looked to a standalone EAP option, which, there may be a cost to you as an employer anywhere from $1 upwards of $3 per employee per month. So I think a good place to start is to kind of work with that kind of bare bones employee assistance program, get some awareness around it, get some utilization around it, and then maybe think about rolling out the standalone program, because your employees, there's some adoption there, there's some awareness there. So it's dollars well spent for you all. Oh, next slide, Brian. Just trying to do it myself there. So additionally, health and welfare benefits, another big one, another thing we see a lot with a lot of nonprofit organizations. So flexible spending accounts, health savings accounts, commuter benefits, they're all a little bit different. The biggest advantage of all of them for employees are their pre-tax dollars, right? So that's a big advantage for employees. And then you as an employer, for you to have these programs in place, another talent attraction tool, another talent retention tool, another thing that employees can kind of lean on aside from that, basic medical plan to help them cover the cost of medical expenses, right? So flexible spending accounts, for those of you who don't know, essentially an employee can set aside pre-tax dollars within a given calendar year, within an annual plan year, to cover eligible medical expenses. So for this particular plan year for 2023, employees can set aside $3,050 per the IRS guidelines, and they're all pre-tax dollars. It is a use it or lose it benefit, right? Sometimes some of the plans have a carryover feature. You can carry over up to, I think it's $500 in a given plan year if unused. However, the rest of the money, if not lose within that plan year, does go away. So it's something that employees can budget at the beginning of the year if they know they have something upcoming, and they could set aside some money in that flexible spending account to cover those expenses. The one nice benefit, one of the nice benefits of the flexible spending accounts is that due to the uniform coverage rule, if I set aside $2,500, or I say I want to allocate $2,500 to my flexible spending account in a given year, that money is available day one on, usually it's facilitated through like a benefits card, like a smart card, right? So I go to CVS or something and I can use it. And if I haven't contributed those pre-tax dollars to hit that $2,500, I still have that money on my card to use up to that amount. So that's a really nice benefit. Health savings accounts, we've seen a bit of an uptick in. So health savings accounts have to be paired with a high deductible health plan. So something that by definition is a HDHP or a high deductible health plan. Employees can set aside pre-tax dollars through a health savings account to cover their deductible costs or other, co-insurance co-pays, whatever it might be. High deductible health plans, the way in which they're structured and the way in which they function, all dollars go to the deductible first, right? So health savings accounts are a nice way to offset a lot of those deductible expenses that an employee may have. So the bit of a difference here is that these dollars can actually be converted to an investment account, right? So a lot of times people, of course, because of the cost of healthcare, end up spending it on medical eligible expenses. But when you get to a certain threshold, it can be used as a savings, vehicle, even for retirement, as Ryan, I'm sure, speaks to his clients about. A lot of times it can be used that way. But given the world we live in and the cost of healthcare, a lot of times it ends up being spent upon eligible medical expenses, which is entirely understandable. Another pre-tax benefit that you may be looking to offer on the health and welfare side is commuter benefits. So I think historically a lot of people associate this with like public transportation, right? And that's very true, which during COVID went away a bit, the remote work life we live in. But for those folks who are still in an office and you have folks commuting to work, another one that we've seen a little bit of a rise in is like bike to work programs. So you essentially can set aside pre-tax dollars, buy bikes for employees. Like if you work in the city or something like that, they could commute to work. And then if they were ever to leave the company, they have the option to buy out the bike or something like that. Little unique, may not be for everyone, but just kind of unique ways or different ways to think about commuter benefits. So next slide, right? All right. So another very common theme, I'm sure you may all be approached by employees about or approached by administration about, or wellness programs, right? And what does that mean, right? I think wellness is a bit of a buzzword these days, but it can mean so many things. There's, physical wellness, there's mental wellness, there's financial wellness, right? So it encompasses a lot of different things. I think ultimately, the folks and the partners that you're working with, they should just be, concerned about encouraging a healthy lifestyle for your employees, right? And that's different for every employee, but if you have the options out there for your employees to choose from, or kind of this, program in place from a wellness side, ultimately, it's, you can't stress the importance enough. The morale improves. There's reduced healthcare costs. I'll get back to that in a moment. And then talent attraction and retention, right? So a lot of these wellness programs, I'll get into some specific examples after too, you can do at either no cost or very low cost. And it might be something different than an organization down the street is doing from you. And it might be something that attracts the right person in your organization. Reduce healthcare costs is a big one. So as you start to mature as an organization, as claims start to be a component of kind of your underwriting on your health insurance program, if you have healthy employees, right, it's going to reduce your healthcare costs, right? Because their health or their claims submitted is going to be a component of that underwriting. Historically, right, I think the more healthy people are, the, claims are typically lower. So it can lead to reduced healthcare costs. So it's really hard, I think, and why there's not a ton of utilization on these programs or really adoption from organizations or employers is because it's really hard to determine a return on the investment, right? It's really hard for you as an organization to say, if to buy expensive food or to put like a food program in place for your employees, that's expensive. How do you define or how do you kind of establish what the return on that investment is? And I think it's very much long-term. It's not going to happen in a year. It's not going to happen in 18 months. It's going to be very much, you'll see the fruits of your labor or the program you put in place down the line. And a lot of it is through reduce healthcare costs, improve morale. Some things you can be doing. So a lot of the insurance carriers here locally and nationally, you can partner with them. They'll do health screenings on site, right? So they'll actually come to your office. You could do a day at the office to have employees in. They'll speak a little bit or, about the different programs they're running and things like that. And they'll actually conduct health screenings, preventative care type screenings on site, right? Which is huge. Work-life balance. So giving employees the option to maybe work from home a day or two, right? I think the return to work thing has been different for everyone, right? I think it looks different. It depends upon the work that you're doing, right? Some people just, you have to be in the office, which is understandable given the line of work you're in. But for those people who have the option, giving employees kind of that day a week or that couple days a week to be at home, to get their work done, to lessen their commute, to check off some items they may have to do where they get a couple of hours back in their day. That goes a long way for organizations and the mental health of employees. Another thing you could do, wellness challenges, fitness initiatives, right? So in terms of like the administration of these things and how you track them, there's a lot of free apps now that employers can use to track step challenges, weight loss challenges, things like that. So, it helps not only, the physical health of individuals, but also morale. It's a chemistry thing. It's a team thing. People can get involved. So those are just some unique things we're seeing and some things people can do to try and, improve upon the wellness program. And then Ryan, I don't know if you want to speak at all, not to put you on the spot, but I know financial wellness is something else we see. You probably see in your line a little bit more.
Yeah, I was going to add, you mentioned it at the very beginning. So one thing we've seen really since COVID, and I think part of the reason is, once COVID hit, a lot of employees, obviously, may have lost their job for a certain period of time. And there was a focus on emergency savings. So it was a focus on more of your financial well-being outside of retirement savings. So it was, if a pandemic hit, how would you be okay for 3 to 6 months? Do you have that savings, that emergency savings set aside? Are your debt to income ratios okay? So that's kind of what sparked it. And a lot of employers are taking the responsibility to say, hey, our employees are they need financial help, right? They need someone to go to, they need resources. Unfortunately, there wasn't really a lot out there. So before, it was employees kind of asking friends, family, doing some research online, trying to put it together. If folks were fortunate enough to work with a good financial planner, they could rely on them as a resource. But since COVID, we've seen the employer take the responsibility of saying, okay, you know what? We offer a retirement benefit. We offer education through retirement for retirement, or historically it was for retirement. We want to do something that's for everything else, the day-to-day, financial well-being for employees, whether it's something simple as putting together a budget or putting together a more comprehensive financial plan, talking about whether to, buy a house or rent, discussions like that. So it's meant to make sure that the employees feel better about where they are from a financial standpoint. And if they don't feel good, at least where they need to go and the steps to get there. When you think of financial wellness, it can look and feel, kind of a lot of different ways, but for the most part, it's all designed around helping the employees feel good about where they are today, while also focusing on the future, whether it's, as I mentioned, saving up to buy a home, certainly retirement's part of that picture. But the first step in that discussion may be, hey, let's put together an emergency savings. And perhaps that's step one, and then let's focus on the bigger items down the road. So we've seen that recently. I think it's only going to become more popular over the next 5 to 10 years. I think we're starting to see the industry get a better grasp of what is most helpful for the employees and how it's best delivered. So I think we're going to see some huge strides in the right direction with whether it's websites or apps or just the deliverables. We've seen a lot of change in just the last few years, and I think we'll continue to see that for the better.
Yeah. And just one other thing I wanted to add too, Ryan, on the wellness piece, and then dive in your retirement piece a bit. So lifestyle spending accounts is another thing we've heard about a lot recently in our world. So these are essentially similar type health and welfare accounts that we spoke about above, like an FSA, where you can, essentially set aside employer funds for employees to utilize for, things like on the physical side, like gym memberships or, workout bikes or things like that for employees to use to help promote physical wellness. Additionally, on the mental health side, help pay for, meditation apps or counseling services or things like that. So lifestyle spending accounts is another thing that it's still very much, I think, in the infancy stages almost, but we're starting to see a little bit more of, and kind of another unique, cost-effective way for employees to promote both physical and mental wellness. So.
Well, skipping over to the retirement plan benefits, we talked a little bit about financial wellness. That certainly ties into part of this picture. A little bit about, it kind of ties what Chris talked about on the health insurance side with the retirement side. Those conversations are becoming more of the same versus two different conversations. So I think we've seen that in the industry and for plan sponsors, which is for the better, just combined education, combined deliverables. So certainly makes things a little easier for the employee. But retirement plan options as a nonprofit organization, there's a few different options out there. Some of the things that we don't see here on this list, you have your 401k plan, your 403b plan, your 457b plan that we often see. There's other plans out there like a 457f plan. You could have a defined benefit plan, which is the traditional pension plans. You may have a different name for your 403b plan. It may be called a TDA, which is a tax deferred annuity, maybe called a supplemental plan, maybe called a TSA, which is a tax sheltered annuity. They're all one and the same with 403b plan, making sure that employees can, put money away out of their own paycheck for retirement savings. But there's quite a few different names for 403b plans. You may have a kind of a base employer plan where you put away a non-elective contribution. So there's a variety of different options, but essentially they kind of boil down to these three. The other one that's not here is a simple IRA, which is a good alternative to a small employer looking to just offer some sort of benefit. Usually the administration costs are next to nothing compared to the 401k or 403b. But this is a good place to start. So for organizations that don't have anything, this is a good place to start, just to look at potentially what you would want to offer, whether it's an employer contribution, whether you just want to offer, an opportunity for employees to take advantage of the IRS code and put away $22,500 or more with the catch up if you're over age 50. So these are all the great benefits of offering a retirement plan option. Obviously, there's the tax advantages to the employee, whether you're doing pre-tax deferrals or Roth, which we can certainly get into, but that's the benefit for the employee. Obviously, the employer, it's a way to attract employees, retain employees. Probably the most important benefit to individuals and families is the health insurance. And then it's, what do you have for retirement? What are you going to do for me? And certainly in the nonprofit industry, we see the retirement plan benefits be slightly richer than what we see in for-profit organizations. Usually the employer contribution is slightly higher. Again, not all cases, but just kind of generally looking at it, there may be a non-elective contribution with a matching contribution for employees that are putting away their own money. But one thing I want to talk about, and this is probably the question that I get the most. And again, this is for organizations that are looking to implement a plan, or perhaps you have one and you're thinking to yourself, well, why did we do a 401k and not a 403b? Or why did we do a 403b and not a 401k? What's this 457b plan? But the question that I get the most is, what's the difference between the 401k and 403b? And it's certainly just not the 2 bullet points that I put here, but I think this is the most common difference that we see. in a 401k and 403b plan. And over the years, these two plans have become more like each other. So really the 403b has become more similar to the 401k plan, and we'll talk about Secure 2.0 as well. But the biggest advantage for a nonprofit, because a for-profit company cannot offer a 403b, they're only limited to the 401k plan. A nonprofit organization can offer a 403b instead of a 401k, and the advantage is this universal availability rule. And that ties into the average deferral percentage test, often referred to as the ADP compliance test. So in the 403b plan, if you offer the plan to all employees, and there's certainly some availability to exclude certain classes of employees, such as students, such as employees that are not scheduled to work more than 20 hours per week. So really 1,000 hours in a 12-month period. You can certainly exclude those employees, but generally, if you offer the 403b plan to all employees, minus any exclusions, you're following that universal availability rule, and you're not required to run the average deferral percentage compliance test. And that average deferral percentage compliance test is where, for 401k plans, it looks at the highly compensated employee and the non-highly compensated employees. It groups the average deferrals of those two groups. So for example, if Chris and I are a highly compensated employee, which is based off of an IRS definition of compensation in the prior year, and we both put 5% away in the retirement plan, that average for that highly compensated group is 5%. If a non-highly let's say we have two employees that are not highly compensated employees, and they put away 3% each, they have an average of 3. In order to pass the ADP test, it has to be within 2% of each other. So that example will pass because Chris and I have an average of 5%. The non-highlies have an average of 3%. It's within that 2% range. So if Chris and I were at 6, that would not pass. The 403b plan, if you follow that universal availability rule, you are not required to run that ADP test. And the benefit there is usually the individuals that want to take advantage of the plan can put away as much as they want up until the IRS limits. And you don't really have to worry about how much participation you have amongst the employee group, and whether it's going to limit some employees from saving as much as they want for the retirement plan. So in our eyes, this is a huge benefit for nonprofits. It's one less thing to worry about. Obviously, we always want to have high participation in plans. We want to help employees get enrolled, understand the benefits. That's certainly something that our plan sponsors want to do as well. But if you have the option and you don't have to run that test, and it's kind of falls into how you want to set up the eligibility requirements, and you can utilize that universal availability rule, a lot of those nonprofits will kind of go towards that 403b route versus the 401k. The other option that we listed here, the 457b plan. So that's a plan that targets, it's often called a top hat plan. So it usually targets key executives of nonprofit organizations as an additional way to save for retirement. So essentially, if you are an employee and you participate in the 403b plan, you could save up to $22,500 in 2023. If you are also participate in a 457b plan, you can save an additional $22,500, which could be a combination of employee dollars as well as the employer making a contribution to that executive. So it's often used in the nonprofit industry as a way to retain those key employees, those key executives, whether by offering an additional employer contribution just to that individual, or having them, be able to put away more money for themselves for retirement. So it's a great plan to offer. We see it a lot in the industry. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it as well, but certainly something we wanted to point out. Getting towards the bottom. So we're fortunate enough where we get a lot of industry stats. I wanted to include a few stats just to give you a sense of 403B plans and what they offer. So 45% of 403B plans offer non-elective contributions, so that can be often referred to as a profit sharing contribution. Obviously, in the nonprofits, it's referred to as that non-elective contribution. So that's typically where you offer, a 2 or 3% contribution across the board, whether employees actually contribute to the plan or not. 69% of 403B plans offer a matching contribution, so that's by far the most common type of employer contribution. And 25% of 403 plans offer a non-elective contribution between 3 and 5%. The match varied. There was no tier that looked higher than the other, so it really varied. But that non-elective contribution, just to give you a sense of what 25% of 403B plans are offering out there, just from a competitive standpoint. Over the last year or two, we've gotten a lot of questions of, hey, we want our benefits package to be competitive. We want to make sure we're keeping pace with the industry, especially the Boston locations. And certainly we've seen plan sponsors revisit their employer contribution piece and really increasing it, whether it be that non-elective or matching contribution.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so now we'll just quickly here dive into Medicaid redeterminations. Not the funnest of stuff, but it's something that's very front of mind, and you may have even had a couple of employees approach you about it. So just want to share a little bit of knowledge on it. So, Medicaid, federally funded health insurance program, right, that certain individuals qualify for based off, income, disability, other certain conditions, right? And at the start of the public health emergency or COVID back in March 2020, those determinations or those eligibilities, right, which eligibility is a huge component of it, they went away, right? So what ultimately happened is that a lot of people jumped on the plan who historically would not have qualified for it. Obviously, federally, they recognized this, they knew it was going to happen, but it was a way to get people insured during the, COVID health crisis. So, Medicaid is the federal program. On the state level here in Massachusetts, it's referred to as Mass Health, which you all might be a little more, knowledgeable about. So that's the Medicaid program here in Massachusetts is Mass Health. So essentially what's going to happen, or what happened starting in April, is they started to send out renewal notices to everyone that was on Mass Health, or everyone that didn't auto renew based off qualifying already. If they had to requalify, they sent out a renewal notice and they want to redetermine, right, who actually qualifies for Medicaid or Mass Health here in Massachusetts. So losing eligibility for Mass Health is considered a qualifying event. The last number that I saw that as a result of the redetermination, there's going to be about 400,000 individuals just here in Massachusetts who are going to be kicked off, for lack of a better word, the Mass Health plan or the program, right? So what does that mean? Well, then they have to go find health insurance somewhere, right? And a lot of times they're going to go to their employer. That's kind of their first stop. So you may get employees approaching you indicating, hey, this is a situation. So there may be an uptick in participation on your plan as a result of that. So just something to be aware about. I think the redetermination process is going to go on for about a year. So it may be a little bit slower. We probably haven't heard the end of it in terms of how it's going to be administered. I know some of the states who rolled it out, it started, I think, in February nationally. That was the earliest it started. And I think a lot of the states are struggling with in terms of people actually filling out their forms, right? So you have 90 days to return your forms to states, right? It's kind of a game as such. And if you don't, you're kicked off the plan. So a lot of the people that are actually being kicked off these plans may very well be eligible, but they're not returning, paperwork, right? And due to technicality, they're being kicked off the plan. So, it's still developing. There's still things that are going to come out about it, but if you do see kind of an uptick in employees, this could be a very good reason of why they'd be seeking employee-sponsored health insurance. And like I said, they have every reason to, because it is a qualifying event, so they can roll onto your plan. It doesn't have to be at your renewal during open enrollment time. It can be anytime throughout the year when they receive the notice. So something to be aware about.
So lastly, we want to cover Secure 2.0. This was a retirement bill that passed on December 29th of 2022. You may remember the Secure Act, which was in December of 2019. It was quickly forgotten about because COVID hit, and then you had CARES Act in, I think, April of 2023. So certainly a lot going on right after Secure 1.0. This retirement legislation we've known has been coming for a while. We weren't exactly sure what was going to be included, what was not, but it's by far the largest retirement legislation in the last 5-6 years. Certainly bigger than the first Secure Act. It has 92 provisions. Not all of them are focused on 403B plans or 401k plans. A lot are about defined benefit plans, simple IRA plans. Not all of them are mandatory, so a lot of them are optional, and they vary with effective dates from 2023 all the way out to 2033, I think, is the last phase of the RMD age. So certainly a lot coming over the next 5-7 years. We anticipate a lot more information to come out in the next couple months. There are provisions that are available now for 2023. There's quite a few going into effect for 2024 and 2025, a lot of which the industry is waiting on a little more guidance from the DOL just to better understand operationally how it's going to work and how the DOL wants some of those provisions to work. So I think as a plan sponsor, you're going to see a lot more information come out about Secure 2.0 for the remainder of the year. My guess is we'll probably have more towards the end of summer or September. A few impacts to nonprofits or 403B plans exactly or specifically. The first is collective investment trusts will be allowed in 403B plans, which they technically didn't completely offer collective investment trusts as part of Secure 2.0. They've kind of laid the foundation. You may actually see in the news that they're including the rest of the collective trust provision in a recent bill or a recent act that come up. It's called Recoup. So it's something that we anticipate will be passed, will be included, in 403B plans can now offer collective investment trusts, just like 401k plans. For years and really forever, 403B plans were not allowed to offer collective investment trusts, which are really a type of investment. So you have mutual funds, which tend to be, the investments offered in retirement plans. A collective trust is similar to a mutual fund, but a lot of larger plans and plans in general will use collective investment trusts. They tend to be less expensive. So for example, you can have the same collective investment trust of a mutual fund, but it may be 2 or 3 basis points cheaper, or potentially a lot less cheaper. So it's perceived to be a good thing. 403B plans will benefit from this certainly, but officially it's not quite in law right now, but it will be shortly. Conforming 403B hardship rules to 401k hardship rules. This is another, when we talk about the differences of 401k plans and 403B plans, these are kind of the detailed differences for 403B plans. The hardship rules for taking a hardship distribution, employees are only able to take the employee contributions less earnings is what was available for hardship distributions. It's now going to fall under the 401k hardship distribution rules, where they, it's really dictated by the plan document, but then it can include employee deferrals, earnings, employer contributions. So it just allows a bigger pool for the employee to pull out for a hardship distribution. And they can also self-certify those hardship distributions now versus the employer certifying that hardship distribution. It's taking the liability off of the employer, putting more on the employee to say, okay, if you're taking this hardship, The IRS has outlined 6 reasons for being able to take a hardship. It's the employee's responsibility now to document that, and if it comes up during their taxes, they'll want to make sure they have that documentation on file. Third one down, long-term part-time employees. This was originally included in Secure Act, but it was originally 3 years. So this is following employees that work for your organization that work over 500 hours a year. And if they work over 500 hours a year, it's now for 2 years, 2 consecutive years, they'll be considered a long-term part-time employee and will be able to enter the retirement plan if you have some sort of eligibility requirement that would then prevent them. They would now become eligible if they hit that 500-hour mark in 2 consecutive years. So again, just promoting the ability for more employees to have access to 403B plans, 401k plans, and the ability to save for retirement. Auto enrollment. So this is for new plans that are established after January 1st. They're required to include auto enrollment feature that goes into effect for 2025. So for example, let's say you start a retirement plan for your organization today in 2023. You are required to offer auto enrollment starting in 2025. And that can include auto escalation as well. What we'll see for current plans that are not required to do this, we'll start to see auto enrollment become more the default and kind of more the norm. So we'll see a lot of plans out there that don't have it. We're most likely going to see plan sponsors revisit the auto enrollment feature, see if it makes sense for the organization, and potentially implement that in the future. The last one, catch-up contribution. So this is one where it's 401ks and 403b plans. For certainly one of the ones that we wanted to highlight here. So for employees that are catch-up contribution, I guess to start is if you're over age 50, you could do a catch-up contribution, which is $7,500 in 2023. That's on top of the IRS $22,500 limit. So collectively, if you're over the age of 50, you could put away up to $30,000 as an employee deferral in 401k and 403b plans. The new catch-up contribution rules, which go into effect in 2025, allow an employee between the ages of 60 and 63 to put in a catch-up contribution of $10,000 versus the $7,500. So it's just trying to allow an employee that may be nearing retirement, hypothetically at age 65, to put away some extra money those last few years while they're still working, and to increase about $2,500 a year over those 4 years. The other thing too that we want to highlight as well is effective in 2024 for employees that make over $145,000 in the prior year. They're required to do Roth contributions as a catch-up. So, if I'm 55 years old, I'm doing a catch-up contribution and I make over $145,000 in the prior year. Starting in 2024, I will be required to make that catch-up contribution as a Roth deferral. Part of that is, this was kind of a revenue neutral bill. So they needed areas where the government was going to get some tax dollars just to balance out, because a lot of these provisions in Secure 2.0 are very favorable for employees and employers. And this is kind of one of the pieces that will be a change, and not a bad thing, but it's just certainly something to be aware of. We have I'll just finish with this. We have an article on our website that outlines a lot more of the 92 provisions. This is just a few of the selected ones that we want to cover today. But certainly more information on the sentinelgroup.com website. And as I mentioned, we'll continue to push out information as we get more information from the DOL over the next few months. So with that, we just want to thank everyone for joining us today. We'll try and end about 10 minutes early for everyone. And we appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, please feel free to enter it in the chat or reach out to us following today's meeting.
Thank you so much once again to our presenters. I'm not seeing any questions coming in, so just as a reminder, I will be sending out the recording and the slides as well as the contact information for the speakers. So you can definitely follow up after. And yeah, thank you for a great presentation and have a great day, everyone.